Good morning, Crossbridge. It is time for your SOAP update on Wednesday, but I am not the face you probably were expecting to see this morning. Pastor Jimmy has asked if I could share my thoughts on Acts 10 with you, and so that's what I'd like to do today. In Acts, as we've been reading, I have been struck just with the boldness of the disciples as they have been going around and talking to people about Jesus's message. But I've noticed that the people that they're talking to have all primarily been Jewish. That's the community that they were living in, and that was the group of people that they were comfortable with. It wasn't until they started getting persecuted that they started to go to other places. And as we see here in chapter 10, Peter has gone to Joppa, and he has been staying there and been working and primarily still though talking to the Jewish people about Jesus's message. He is in Acts 10 on the rooftop, and he sees a vision from God. And that vision shows him that there is nothing that is going to be clean or unclean, because Jewish people tended to have a very strict idea of what made them clean, unclean, what made them holy, able to enter into the presence of God or not. And so God clearly touches Peter's heart and says, we're not going to be doing that anymore. We're going to be going outside of the realms in which you are comfortable. Right after that, there's a knock on the door, and there's some Gentile people. And remember, Gentile just means anyone who is not Jewish. And so these Gentile messengers come and say that they are there on the behalf of Cornelius, who is a Roman centurion. So not only is he a Gentile, but as a Roman soldier, Peter probably would have looked at him as enemy number one, because the Romans were occupying the state of Israel at this time. And so Peter realizes that the message God had just given him is applicable in this moment. And so he goes with the men to Cornelius's house. And that's where I want to pick it up in Acts chapter 10. We see in verse 34 that Peter replies, I see very clearly that God shows no favoritism. In every nation, he accepts those who fear him and do what is right. And so he then presents the gospel to Cornelius and his household. And he says in verse 43 that he, meaning Jesus, is the one all the prophets testified about, saying that everyone who believes in him will have their sins forgiven through his name. And even as Peter was saying these things, the Holy Spirit fell upon all who were listening to the message. The Jewish believers who came with Peter were amazed that the gift of the Holy Spirit had been poured out on the Gentiles too. And in this, we learn that God's message is not just for the Jewish people, but God's message is for everyone. He has come to earth with salvation for us all. And it got me thinking, who in my life am I thinking God's message isn't for? Are there people that I'm discounting, thinking like, no, they're not going to care, so I'm not going to tell them? Are there neighbors who I'm like, nah, they're a little maybe too far gone, I don't think I'm going to talk to them? Or am I looking at people through this new lens that God shows Peter, saying, you know what? The message of Jesus is for each and every one of us. And I just wonder, Crossbridge, is there a place that we as a church are looking through a lens that isn't the one that Jesus has for us? Are we discounting inviting someone to church because we think they're not going to be interested? Are you looking at any coworkers and thinking like, I'm really not going to say anything about Jesus. I don't want to make it awkward. I think Acts chapter 10 really reminds us today that the message of Jesus, the gospel, the good news, is for everyone. So I want to encourage you this week to be bold and join me in telling everyone the message of Jesus.